Life Top 5. Top 5 striking images that show COVID-19's impact on the world. One of the more interesting impacts of the Chinese coronavirus, COVID-19, on the world, where pictures are concerned, isn't so much what we see, as what we don't see. While people have sequestered themselves inside their homes, the world has gone mostly silent and empty. 5 quarantined Italians singing together from their balconies. Soon after China began implementing massive quarantine measures in Wuhan and other areas, the numbers being reported from the country showed a decline in cases and deaths. As those numbers began falling, they skyrocketed in places like Italy, which was one of the hardest hit nations outside of China throughout the month of March. As social distancing became the norm in Italy, its citizens found themselves isolated in their homes with little to do other than worry about what was happening in the hospitals and just outside their doors. In an attempt to combat the isolation and sense of dread many were experiencing, people all over the nation went to their balconies and began making music with one another. These musical flash mobs came together all over Italy, and on March 13th, people all over the country went to their balconies to collectively sing the national anthem, Inno di Mameli, in a show of unity during the crisis. This picture taken by Maro Cinquetti shows a woman singing from her balcony, and if you haven't seen this one, there are thousands of photographs and videos of people singing to and with one another all over the internet. 4 homeless in Las Vegas sleeping in social distancing grids. During a pandemic where governments are telling all of their citizens to self-isolate themselves in their homes, it quickly became apparent that there was a sizable population that couldn't follow that guidance. The homeless are at greater risk of catching the disease, but that's not solely the result of their having to sleep outside, it's mostly due to their close proximity with one another. Whether they are on the streets or in shelters, homeless people often find themselves stacked closely with one another, and that makes them susceptible to COVID-19. And it also makes it more likely that they will infect others. Exponential infection is one of the greatest concerns where COVID-19 is concerned, and in cities like Las Vegas, the way the city has had to deal with it made international news. Shelters were forced to close amidst the crisis, leaving as many as 500 on the streets. The city painted grids on the upper parking lot of the Cashman Center, with each box being meant as a place for one person each to sleep. Unfortunately, all good intentions being what they are, people online pointed out that the squares were too close together, negating the need for social distancing, which further spread the image to others as it became viral. 3 Social distancing in Colombo, Sri Lanka. While the year 2020 may go down in history as being the one where a global pandemic swept across the globe, more people will likely think back on it with 2 words: social distancing. That's a term few had ever heard or considered using outside of the occasional introvert, but with COVID-19 spreading exponentially throughout global populations, social distancing became the norm. Societies, where people typically greeted one another with a hearty handshake or a kiss on each cheek, find themselves standing as far from one another as possible. This picture was taken in Sri Lanka by Dinika Lianawat outside a grocery store in Colombo. The people in the picture can be seen wearing masks, and are standing approximately 1 meter apart. Most governments and the WHO are telling people to double that distance, but it's not always possible, leaving many in unsafe, yet desperately in need of supplies. Sri Lanka placed a curfew on its citizens prior to this photograph but relaxed it for a short time following a lull in newly reported cases. to USNS Comfort and the Statue of Liberty. Hospital beds, or more accurately, the lack of hospital beds became a problem shortly after COVID-19 reached the United States. It makes sense, as hospitals aren't in the business of handling a global epidemic, they're there to treat and care for patients under normal operating conditions. That works just fine when the world isn't undergoing a pandemic, but in cities like New York City and Los Angeles, a shortage of hospital beds due to the influx of COVID-19 patients caused two distinct problems. There weren't enough beds for COVID-19 patients, and there were almost no beds available to people suffering from everything else. People needing surgery, chemo treatment, and every other issue folks go to the hospital for were running into a lack of capacity in treating them. To combat the problem, the USN sent two ships, the USNS Comfort and USNS Mercy, to New York City and Los Angeles, respectively. Both vessels were meant to ease the burden by providing 1,000 hospital beds for patients not suffering from COVID-19, though since they have arrived, the USNS Comfort has taken on patients suffering from the disease. Shots like this one showing the Statue of Liberty in the foreground of the USNS Comfort spread all over the internet as it approached the port. The arrival indicated a show of support and a sign of hope in the days to come. 1. Toilet paper. For whatever reason, people around the world began panic buying as the COVID-19 crisis worsened. Even in nations that had yet to experience a single case, people flocked to stores, but they weren't there to buy rice, beans, or other long-lasting sustainable foods. They were there to buy toilet paper, and lots of it. It's rather inexplicable, but toilet paper became the hot commodity of March 2020, and people would line up to get a single package of rolls in much the same way folks had to line up their cars to buy gasoline during the OPEC oil embargo. For weeks, you couldn't find a single roll of toilet paper, and pictures like this one could be seen all over social media and news sites. Supplies of paper products were completely absent from store shelves all over the world. This picture was taken by me at my local neighborhood Walmart market. Images like this one are common all over the internet, and while it can be problematic for some, the companies that produce and install bidets are enjoying an upsurge in sales as more and more people realize they won't have anything to wipe with very soon,